The seat by the window. The morning sun peeked through the small window of the cramped room in Chennai. It warmed the face of a young boy named Sundar, who was already awake. He was not like other boys. While others played cricket or watched movies, Sundar would sit beside his father's old radio and twist the dial gently, listening to voices from faraway lands. His mother, Lakshmi, walked into the room carrying a steel cup of warm milk. She smiled at him. "You woke up early again," she said, her voice soft and tired. Sundar looked at her face. She was beautiful once, people said, but years of cooking, cleaning, and walking in the hot sun had left lines on her skin and cracks in her feet. She never complained. Not once. "I had a dream," he said, taking the milk. "I saw a place full of lights and glass buildings. I was there, Amma. I was speaking on a big stage." His mother laughed gently. "You will be there one day," she whispered. "Just don't forget your home." Those words stayed with him. That same day, Sundar walked to school barefoot. His sandals had broken weeks ago, but he didn't mind. He sat in the front row and listened to every word the teacher said. At night, he would study by the yellow light of a single bulb, while his father worked overtime to earn a little more money. Years passed. Sundar got a scholarship. He flew for the first time in his life, leaving India for the United States. He sat by the window and watched his country disappear beneath the clouds. His fingers gripped the armrest tightly. He was scared, not of the flight, but of failing. He was 23, in a strange land where people spoke too fast and food tasted like nothing. He worked part-time to pay for food. He lived in a small apartment with 5 others. Some nights he went to sleep hungry, but he never stopped studying, and every Sunday he called home. His mother would ask, "Are you eating?" He would lie and say yes. One winter night, something changed. His professor called him into his office. "Your project, this thing you've built," the professor said slowly. "It's incredible. Google might be interested." Sundar's heart stopped for a moment. He had heard of Google. It was not just a company. It was a dream. An impossible mountain. He applied. He waited. Weeks passed. Then one cold morning he got an email. "We would like to meet you." His hands shook. He didn't have a proper suit. So he borrowed one from a friend. It didn't fit right. The sleeves were too long and the shoes pinched. But Sundar didn't care. He flew to California for the interview. They asked him questions, hard ones. Some he couldn't answer. Others he solved with quiet confidence. He didn't brag. He just told the truth. A few days later, he got the call. "You're in." He sat down slowly on the floor of his apartment, staring at nothing. He wanted to tell someone. He wanted to scream. But all he did was whisper, "Amma, I did it." He sent money home for the first time. Not a lot. Just enough to fix the roof and buy his mother a new sari. Years passed again. He climbed slowly inside Google. Not because he was loud, not because he had connections, but because he listened. Because he respected every voice in the room. He remembered names. He stayed late. He helped others rise with him. Then came the day that changed everything. He was invited to an event in London. It was important. The flight was first class. Google had arranged it. Soft seats, endless food, luxury he had never known. But Sundar didn't sit in that seat. He called his mother. "Amma," he said, "have you ever seen clouds from the sky?" "No," she replied. He smiled. "Then pack your bag." When they arrived at the airport, the staff led them to the first-class gate. His mother was confused. "This can't be for us," she whispered. He nodded. "It's for you," she cried. Not loudly, just a silent stream of tears that no one noticed. No one but him. When they boarded, Sundar sat in economy. He gave the first-class seat to his mother. When the flight attendant asked why, he said, "Because she gave up her life for me. This is the least I can give back." A nearby passenger heard him. Then another. Soon the whole cabin was silent. People watched as a mother with cracked feet and tired eyes sat in a leather seat, smiling like a child. And Sundar. Sundar closed his eyes and whispered a prayer. But the world wasn't done testing him. When they landed, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Pichai, the voice said. This is urgent. We need to speak. Your past. There's something we found. Sundar's heart dropped. The past? What could it be? And just like that, the piece was gone. The phone call. The phone was still pressed to Sundar's ear when the line went silent. Only the low hum of the airport surrounded him now. Travelers moved past with heavy bags and light hearts, greeting loved ones or hurrying toward departure gates. But Sundar stood still, his fingers wrapped tightly around the phone, his eyes fixed on nothing. His mother, a few steps ahead, turned and smiled at him. She looked younger somehow, like time had paused just long enough for her to remember what joy felt like. She was still overwhelmed by the flight, by the seat that reclined with a button, the warm towel they gave her, and the way the window framed the sky like a moving painting. What is it, Kanna? She asked softly, using the old name she hadn't used since he left for America. He forced a smile. Nothing, Amma. Just a call from work. But it wasn't work. It was something darker. His mind returned to the voice on the phone, calm, cold, and strangely distant. Your past. There's something we found. What did that mean? He had never done anything wrong. He had studied hard, worked hard, never cheated, never hurt anyone. But the voice had spoken with certainty, not doubt. He tried to shake it off. They were in London for a reason. He was scheduled to speak at a major conference. The world's top tech leaders would be watching. This was the kind of moment he had once dreamed of from the floor of his small house in Chennai. He couldn't let fear get in the way now. But fear is strange. It doesn't need proof. It doesn't ask permission. It simply enters the mind, sits in silence and waits. That night they checked into the hotel. It was the kind of place Sundar could never have imagined in his youth. Glass walls, soft carpets, lights that dimmed at the sound of your voice. But he wasn't looking at any of that. He was staring at his laptop, trying to trace the number that had called him. It was private. Untraceable. He stared at the screen for a long time. His mother knocked on the door of his room, holding a small bowl of rice and curd she had brought from home, wrapped in newspaper and plastic. Eat this, she said. You haven't touched anything all day. He took it without speaking. Sundar? She said gently, sitting beside him. Are you afraid of something? He paused. Do you think someone knows something about me, Amma? She looked at him confused. What? Would they know? He didn't answer. The words felt heavy in his chest and he couldn't place why. Amma? He asked slowly. Before Appa got his job at the railways? Was there anything? Anything strange? Anything secret? His mother's face changed. Just slightly. Her eyes shifted away, her hands moved to her lap. Why are you asking this? She whispered. He looked at her, really looked. Because someone called me today. They said they found something about my past. She sat still for a moment. Then she placed her hand on his. Your past is clean, she said. But your father, he had to make sacrifices. We were poor, very poor, and sometimes poor men take risks. Sundar swallowed. The room felt colder. What kind of risks? She didn't speak for a while. Then finally, in a voice filled with shame she had buried for decades, she said, Your Appa once took a loan from a man, not a bank. A man who didn't write things down. He promised to pay it back, but he couldn't. And so, he gave them something else. What did he give? Sundar asked, his voice tight. She didn't answer. Outside, the London sky grew darker. Clouds rolled in like slow smoke. Inside, Sundar stared at his mother, waiting. But she was done talking. Whatever memory she had touched, it was too painful to share. The next day, Sundar stood on stage. The room was full. Cameras flashed. People, applauded as he walked to the podium. The lights were bright, and for a moment he felt the old energy return. The kind that comes from purpose, from knowing you belong. He spoke about technology, about the future, about how the smallest idea, when planted in the right soil, could change the world. And the crowd listened. They clapped, some even cried. But then, just as he was about to leave the stage, a hand rose from the audience. A woman, middle-aged, sharp eyes. She held a phone in one hand. "Mr. Pichai," she said, "can I ask you a question not on your official list?" He hesitated, then nodded. She stepped forward, her voice rising. "Were you aware that your father's name appears in a 1982 document related to a failed government tender? That it involves a payment that was never declared?" The room went silent. Sundar's breath caught. How did she know? He cleared his throat. "I was a child in 1982, he said. "I knew nothing about tenders or payments. If there was a mistake, it was not mine." "But you benefited from it," she said sharply. "Your education, your rise. Some say your family's early connections gave you an advantage." There it was, not an accusation. A quiet war. He looked at the crowd. Some stared, some looked down. Others leaned forward, hungry for the fall of another hero. Sundar took a deep breath. "If that were true," he said, "I wouldn't have walked to school barefoot. My father didn't buy favors. He bought time. Time to give his son a better life. If that offends you, I'm sorry. But I owe him everything." He walked off the stage before anyone could stop him. That night, the headlines exploded. Tech giant linked to financial mystery. Was Sundar Pichai's success built on secrets? The truth behind the man who gave up first class. The phone rang again. Same voice. "Now you understand?" the caller said. "The past doesn't stay buried, especially when you're at the top." "What do you want?" Sundar asked. A pause. "Everything." And the line went dead. Sundar stared into the mirror of his hotel room. The man looking back was tired. Older than he felt. Beneath the surface of his success, a storm had been hiding. Waiting. But he wasn't ready to fall. Not yet. Not without finding the truth. Not without protecting the one person who mattered more than anything. His mother. And someone wanted to use her. The memory she never wanted to recall. The city was asleep, but Sundar wasn't. London's skyline sparkled outside the hotel window, a painting of wealth and power. But inside his room, shadows lingered. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the phone in his hand like it might explode. His mother had gone to sleep in the next room, exhausted from the long day, unaware of the weight now hanging over her son's shoulders. He replayed the voice in his head. "Now you understand. The past doesn't stay buried, especially when you're at the top." Then came the threat. "We want everything." Sundar wasn't sure what everything meant. His position at Google, his name, his peace, or something worse. But he had seen enough in life to know this wasn't just about headlines or internet gossip. This was deliberate. Someone was orchestrating something larger, pulling at strings only they could see. But why now? Why dig into something from the 1980s? His fingers moved quickly over his laptop keyboard. He began looking into records from his father's old railway department, using his access as a tech executive to search quietly. Nothing illegal, just quiet curiosity fueled by fear. And somewhere between old scanned documents and fading reports, he found a file. Tender Ref. 211A 1982. Electrical panel installations. Southern Railways. There was a signature. Raghunathan Pichai. His father. Beside it, in red ink, the word disqualified. Sundar stared at it. The file didn't suggest any crime, just a failed bid. But if it was disqualified, why had the project still gone forward? Why had his father been paid anything at all, according to the reporter's claims? He heard a noise behind him. His mother. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes soft with worry. "You're still awake?" she asked, stepping closer. "What are you looking at?" He didn't hide the screen this time. He turned it toward her. Amma, he said gently, "I need to know what happened." You have to tell me the truth now. Someone is threatening me, and it has something to do with this. She looked at the screen. She didn't blink. Then slowly, she sat down on the edge of the bed and began to speak, not quickly, not all at once, but like someone dragging words from deep inside the earth, afraid they would burn her fingers. Your father, he was proud. Too proud, she began. He wanted to get that contract badly. It would have changed everything for us. We wouldn't have had to borrow rice from neighbors or wait for the monsoon to decide what we eat. Sundar listened in silence. He submitted the best design. He knew the system, but someone told him it was already promised to another man. Politics, you know how it was. And? Sundar asked softly. And your father met a man, a smooth-talking man with glasses and a thick file. He offered a deal. If your father agreed to walk away quietly, the man would ensure he received a small payment. Unofficial. Just enough to keep things moving. Your father, he didn't want to take it, but you were sick that month. The medicine was expensive. I had already sold my gold chain. She looked at Sundar now. So he took it, she whispered. A small envelope. No record. No receipt. The air in the room turned heavy. We never spoke about it again. Your father carried the guilt in his bones. And when he died, he made me promise to never tell you. He said he didn't want your future to be built on a lie. Sundar felt like the ground beneath him had shifted, not enough to make him fall, but just enough to remind him that everything, even the strongest foundation, could carry a secret. He closed the laptop slowly. Amma, he said after a while, I think someone knows this. Someone who wants to use it. She said nothing. Outside, the city lights flickered. Sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. London slept on, unaware that one of the world's most respected voices was now being silenced by a whisper from his own past. The next morning, Sundar did something he hadn't done in a long time. He called someone he once considered a friend, Rajiv, his college roommate from IT. Rajiv was now a journalist, not the kind who chased scandals or wrote clickbait, the kind who looked for truth in broken places. I need your help, Sundar said. That's not something I ever thought I'd hear from you, Rajiv replied. What's going on? There's someone threatening me. They say my father was involved in a shady deal back in 1982. They want to bring it out, maybe twist it. I don't even know what their goal is yet. There was a pause. Why me? Rajiv asked. Because you don't owe me anything, Sundar said quietly. And I need someone who can see the truth without protecting me. There was another silence. Then Rajiv's voice softened. Send me everything. Every document you have. And Sundar, stay out of the public eye for now. If they're using this to destabilize you, there's more coming. And there was. That evening, while Sundar and his mother walked quietly along the Thames River, a small group of photographers appeared. Not paparazzi, not media. These were different, silent, fast, clinical. They didn't shout questions. They didn't ask for a pose. They just took pictures. One of Sundar holding his mother's hand. Another of her eating a simple sandwich on a park bench. Within hours, those photos were everywhere. But the headlines were strange. Mother of tech mogul lived in poverty for decades while son became billionaire. Pichai's wealth questioned after new images emerge. It didn't make sense. The story wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about shame. Guilt. Trying to make him look like a man who had forgotten where he came from. But Sundar had never forgotten. He had given up first class so his mother could feel the sky. He had walked miles without shoes. He had fed others, before himself. This wasn't about the truth. This was about breaking a symbol. And just as he was about to shut the laptop again, another message appeared. An email. No subject, no name, just a link. He clicked it. A video began to play. Grainy footage, old, clearly digitized from a tape. A man's voice, smooth, calm, dangerous. This is the last warning. We can destroy everything. Step down, or we show the world what else we found. The screen went black. Sundar leaned back in his chair. He felt the fear again. But underneath the fear, something else was growing. Resolve. He had built his life one step at a time, not with shortcuts, not with secrets. And if the world wanted to test that, he was ready. But first he needed to go back. Not to America, not to London, to Chennai. Because the answers he needed weren't on a server or in a file. They were in the place he left behind, and someone there knew the full truth. Someone who had been watching all along. The road to Chennai, the airplane touched down in Chennai just after midnight. The cabin lights flickered gently, and the faint scent of humid night air crept in through the ventilation system. Sundar sat still, his seatbelt fastened long after the light had turned off. He stared at the window, not looking at anything in particular. The city lights below didn't bring him comfort this time. They looked familiar, but in the way old photographs do. Faded, distant, quietly painful. His mother sat beside him, clutching the edge of her shawl, her eyes scanning the airport runway through the window. "It hasn't changed," she said, softly. Sundar gave her a tired smile. Some things don't. But he knew that wasn't true. Chennai had changed. The traffic had grown louder, the buildings taller, the air thicker with urgency. But the memories, they remained exactly as he left them. They drove in silence through narrow lanes and wide intersections, past temples wrapped in strings of orange marigold, past shops that never closed, past the street corners where barefoot boys played cricket with plastic bats and worn tennis balls. The driver, sensing the gravity of the silence, kept his eyes on the road and said nothing. They arrived at the old house. It stood like a stubborn relic squeezed between a modern pharmacy and a 4-story apartment block. The walls were faded. The gate was rusted. The plants in the front yard had grown wild as if time had forgotten to trim them. But the door opened with the same creak it always had. Inside, the air smelled of age and something else. Something like memories soaked into the walls. His mother moved slowly through the rooms, touching furniture like she was greeting old friends. Sundar stood near the doorway, unsure of how to feel. Here, he had dreamed of the world. Now the world was closing in on him. He opened a box in the corner of the room. His father's belongings. Papers, files, tools, and a small, dusty photograph of the family at the beach. His father looked tired even then, standing in the sun, with a forced smile, one hand resting protectively on Sundar's shoulder. He flipped through old ledgers, finding nothing unusual until he reached the bottom of the box. A sealed envelope. No address. No stamp. Just a name written in faint pencil. S. Mukherjee. He held it in his hand, unsure if it should be opened. His mother noticed the hesitation. "Mukherjee was your father's friend once," she said. "They worked together, but then something happened. A fight. They never spoke again." "Do you know where he is?" Sundar asked. She nodded slowly. "Last I heard, he was living in Perambur, small house behind the post office." "But Sundar," she paused, "he's not the same. He disappeared for years. Came back only after your father died. Something broke in him." Sundar didn't wait. By morning, he was knocking on a weather-worn door behind the old post office. The house was small, almost forgotten by the street. Paint peeled from the edges and an old radio played faintly from inside. An old man answered. His beard was long and his eyes were pale, like milk diluted with water. But the moment he saw Sundar, he froze. "You're Pichai's boy," he said. Sundar nodded. "He left something with you," he said quietly. "Didn't he?" Mukherjee stepped aside. "Come in." The room smelled of dust and sandalwood. Stacks of newspapers covered the table. A ceiling fan creaked slowly overhead. Sundar sat on a chair that wobbled slightly under his weight. Mukherjee didn't offer tea. Didn't ask how he was. Instead, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. Brown, brittle, tied with a red string. "Your father asked me to burn this," Mukherjee said. "But I couldn't. I didn't know if I was protecting him or betraying him. Sundar untied the folder. Inside were 3 documents. One was a receipt, handwritten, signed with a thumbprint. The second was a typed agreement between 2 men, Raghunathan Pichai and someone listed only as MK. The initials matched the man in the mysterious call. The paper detailed a deal. Raghunathan would withdraw his bid for a government contract in exchange for a promise of protection and future opportunity. The third document was a confession, not a legal one, more like a letter. Sundar's father had written it in shaky handwriting, addressed simply, "To my son when he is ready." Sundar began to read it. "Sundar, my boy, if you are reading this, then either the truth has found you or your heart has led you home. I did what I thought was best for our family. I took money because your fever wouldn't break and your mother hadn't eaten in 2 days. I never wanted that life for you. That's why I buried this. Not because I was proud, but because I was ashamed. If anyone ever uses this against you, know this. My guilt is not your burden. You built your own life. Not on my sin, but in spite of it." The paper trembled in Sundar's hands. "Who was MK?" Sundar asked. Mukherjee hesitated. "That's the real question," he said. "He wasn't just a middleman. He worked with men in power, businessmen, politicians. He vanished after the scandal, but someone like him doesn't stay hidden forever. He becomes something else." Sundar stood up slowly. He had everything he needed now. The full truth. The documents. His father's words. But more importantly, he had clarity. This wasn't just a smear campaign. This was strategic, targeted. Someone had dug up his father's shame to shake his son's world, and it had almost worked. But now, he was done running. Before leaving, Mukherjee said one last thing. "You should know. MK was spotted in London last month. Someone said he started a tech advisory firm. Silent investor. Never shows his face, but his fingerprints are everywhere. And he's using your name in quiet circles. Says he mentored you." Sundar stared at the old man, stunned. "He's claiming he helped me rise?" Mukherjee nodded. "And now he wants to take credit, or take you down." When Sundar returned to the old house that night, he sat in the backyard alone. The stars above were dim, lost behind clouds. He thought of the journey, the long road from barefoot walks to boardrooms. He had never cheated, he had never begged, but now someone was trying to rewrite his story. His mother stepped outside carrying a cup of warm milk. "What will you do now?" she asked. Sundar looked up, calm and certain. "I'll tell the truth," he said. "Before he turns it into a lie." She sat beside him and placed her hand on his. "You were always brave," she said softly. "But now you must be stronger than you've ever been." He nodded, because the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The voice behind the curtain. The plane ride back to London felt different this time. Sundar sat alone in a business class seat, not by choice but because his mother had insisted on staying in Chennai. "This is your fight," she told him. "I'll only worry if I see you fighting alone." Her words were simple, but they echoed in his mind louder than the hum of the engines. He looked out the window, watching the clouds float beneath the wings. The sky was calm, but inside his thoughts raced. Every second felt like a countdown to something bigger, something he could no longer avoid. He opened his laptop, scanning the documents again. The letter from his father, the secret agreement, with MK, the receipt, and the confession. The weight of these pages wasn't just in what they said, it was in what they threatened to undo. All the years of quiet work, of building without noise, of rising through kindness and humility, it could all be rewritten by someone who whispered, "You were never the real story." He arrived in London at dawn. The city was just waking up. Shops opened their shutters, street cleaners sprayed the sidewalks, and the morning rush began. But Sundar moved with purpose. There were no more pauses, no more waiting. He met Rajiv, the journalist, at a quiet cafe tucked between 2 alleyways in Soho. It was raining lightly, and the windows fogged up with each breath. Rajiv looked tired. But more than that, he looked worried. I did some digging, he said, sliding a folder across the table. And you're right. MK didn't disappear. He changed his name. Now he goes by Manav Kaul. He operates through shell companies, private consulting for governments, political campaign tech, digital surveillance firms in Europe, India, Africa. And yes, he's been using your name, in hushed circles, mostly to build trust but also to plant doubts. Sundar flipped through the papers. Bank transfers, company registration forms, leaked emails. He's the one who sent that video, Rajiv said. He didn't expect you to trace it, but I found the server location. It was routed through 2 dummy firms, both owned by Kaul's holding group. Why me? Sundar asked. What does he want from me? Rajiv's answer was quiet, brutal. He wants your story, not to destroy it, but to hijack it, to claim he built you, mentored you, influenced your choices. He wants to stand in your shadow and then claim it was his light all along. Sundar leaned back. And if I don't agree, he'll keep leaking pieces of your past, frame your father as corrupt, turn your success into scandal, one article at a time, one whisper after another. Sundar stared at the window. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low. Then we give them the truth, he said. Rajiv blinked. You're going public? Yes. Sundar nodded. All of it. The documents. My father's letter. Even the mistakes. Especially the mistakes. Rajiv paused. You know what that means, right? People don't care about the whole truth. They care about headlines. The story will still hurt you. Sundar smiled. The kind of smile that comes only when you've made peace with pain. But it won't control me anymore. They left the cafe and headed to Rajiv's studio. It was a simple room. 1 camera, 1 mic, no lights, no crew, just truth. They recorded a single take. Sundar sat in front of the camera and began to speak. His voice was slow, steady. My name is Sundar Pichai. I'm not perfect. I was raised by a man who once made a mistake. Not for greed, not for power, but to keep his child alive. And yes, someone is using that mistake to write a different story about me. One where I didn't earn what I have. One where I am a product of shadows. But here's my truth. I walked barefoot to school. I studied under a single bulb. I gave up comfort so my mother could see the sky. And every achievement, every step forward, was mine. Not stolen, not gifted. Mine. He paused. And to the person who wants to turn my life into a lie, I see you, and I forgive you. But I will not be silent. The video was uploaded that same evening. Rajiv clicked publish with a deep breath, and then they waited. The first hour was quiet, just a few hundred views. But by midnight, the video had crossed 50,000. By morning, it had crossed 1 million. And then, the world woke up. Comments flooded in. Some skeptical, some emotional, some deeply personal. My father also made mistakes. Thank you for reminding me that doesn't make him evil. You didn't just speak for yourself. You spoke for all of us who came from nothing. We believe you, but not everyone was kind. Some called it damage control. Others said he was performing humility. And then, as if on cue, another leak appeared. A tabloid headline screamed, Google CEO's father took bribes, new footage emerges. The video was old, shaky. It showed a man, Raghunathan Pichai, speaking to another man near a railway yard. Money passed between hands. No sound, no proof. Just images that could be interpreted any way the viewer wished. And Sundar knew. This was Kaul's final move. Paint the picture. Let the world fill in the rest. He stared at the footage that night, alone in his hotel room. Not in fear, but in deep reflection. This wasn't about proving innocence anymore. This was about reclaiming something deeper. Dignity. He picked up the phone and called the one person who had never spoken during this whole storm. His older cousin, Aaron. Aaron had worked with their father years ago. He had been there during the failed contract. He had seen what others hadn't. "I need to know," Sundar said. "What really happened that night at the rail yard, the night that video was taken?" Arun was silent. Then he said, "Come home." Sundar flew to Madurai the next morning. He didn't bring a team. He didn't bring protection. Just a notebook and his father's letter in his coat pocket. When he arrived, Aaron met him at the gate. He didn't say hello. He didn't smile. He just said, "You don't know the whole story." They sat under the neem tree in the backyard, and Arun began to speak. What he revealed would change everything. Not just what Sundar believed about his father, but what the world would soon learn about Manav Kaul. The man behind the mask, the neem tree in Arun's backyard stood tall, its roots thick and twisted beneath the dry soil like veins in a tired hand. Sundar sat cross-legged on the old stone bench, the letter from his father folded carefully in his lap. A small breeze stirred the dust, and in that silence between wind and breath, his cousin finally spoke. "You were just a boy, Sundar," Arun began. "But that night, the night everyone talks about, the night they filmed your appa near the rail yard, I was there." Sundar looked up, his eyes sharp. "You saw what happened?" Aaron nodded. "Yes, and it wasn't what they think. Your father didn't take money that night. He gave it." Sundar's eyebrows pulled together in confusion. "What do you mean?" Arun leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Your appa was warned. A week before the tender was due, someone approached him. MK, a man dressed in white, clean shoes, smooth talk. He said your father's bid would be denied unless he paid a facilitation fee. Your appa refused. Said we would do things the right way, but then just days later a worker on the site fell and broke his spine. We all knew it was no accident." Aaron paused. The man's wife came begging. "No money for the hospital. Your father couldn't ignore it. He didn't have enough, but he scraped together what he could. And that's what you saw in the video. Not a bribe, but a mercy." Sundar's heart pounded. The image, the video, the accusations, they had all been twisted from that single moment. "Why didn't anyone say anything all these years?" Sundar asked. "Because your father was ashamed," Arun said. "Not because of what he did, but because he knew how it would look. A man giving money near a shady deal? No one would believe the truth if the lie looked more convenient." Sundar sat back. It all made sense now. The missing pieces, the silence, the fear in his mother's eyes, the cryptic threat from Kaul. But there was still one piece left. "Who recorded the video?" Sundar asked. Arun's face darkened. "Someone working for MK. They wanted insurance, a tool to keep your father under control in case he changed his mind. They never used it while he lived. But now they're using it against you." Sundar stood slowly. "Then it's time we stop hiding." He flew back to London the next day. This time there was no fear, no uncertainty, only clarity, the kind that comes when a man has nothing left to protect but the truth. He met Rajiv again. Together, they prepared one last release. This wasn't just a press statement. It wasn't a tweet. It was a full story. A documentary-style video, interviews with Arun, scans of the original documents, side-by-side breakdowns of the video footage, and most importantly, the full confession letter from his father, narrated in Sundar's own voice. "I was not a perfect man," the letter said, "but I tried to be a decent one. I didn't teach my son to chase power. I taught him to listen more than he speaks, to lift others as he climbs. If they ever doubt him, remind them that greatness doesn't begin in a boardroom. It begins with doing the right thing, even when no one is watching." The video was published under the title, "The Story Behind the Seat He Gave Away," and the truth they tried to bury within hours. It was everywhere. People didn't just watch it. They felt it. They shared it. Teachers played it in classrooms. Journalists used it as a case study. Families sat together in silence as Sundar's voice echoed through living rooms, soft and real. One comment, pinned at the top, read, "This is what grace looks like under fire," but not everyone was silent. A week after the video was released, Manav Kaul was called in for questioning by European authorities. The trail of shell companies, false claims, and unethical contracts unraveled quickly. Sundar's team, now aided by whistleblowers and leaked internal memos, had enough to expose years of quiet corruption, and Kaul's name was right at the center. He was never arrested. He was too smart for that, but his power evaporated like mist in morning light. No one returned his calls anymore. No one sat next to him at events. And soon, he disappeared again, this time for good. As for Sundar, he returned to the stage. Not to defend himself, but to speak of something greater. At a global leadership summit weeks later, he stepped to the podium. The room was full. Cameras, lights, a sea of waiting faces. But Sundar spoke without notes, without fear. "When I was 10, I saw my mother go without food so I could have a school uniform. When I was 16, I saw my father cry in silence after losing a bid he worked on for months. And today, I see a world obsessed with perfection, with appearance, with easy success. But if my journey has taught me anything, it's this. Character is not built in spotlight. It's built in the dark, in the moments when no one is watching." He paused. "I gave up my seat in first class not because I wanted to make a statement, but because the woman who raised me deserved to see the world from a window she never had. And if that gesture became a story, let it be one about gratitude, not glory." The room stood still, and then applause, not the kind that erupts instantly, the kind that builds slowly, deeply, honestly, because people knew. They weren't clapping for a man in a suit. They were clapping for a boy who once studied by candlelight, a son who never let his mother be forgotten, a leader who chose truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. Later that evening, Sundar walked back to his hotel, alone. His phone buzzed, a message from his mother. "I saw your speech. Your father would have been proud." "I always was." He stood there in the middle of the pavement under a dim streetlight with the city humming around him, and for the first time in months, he let himself breathe. Not because the world had finally listened, but because he had never stopped believing in the power of quiet strength, and now, neither had the world.